What's up, everybody, and welcome to a very important video. This is a video that I've been meaning to make for a minute, but I just haven't had the time or the ability to put together. So we are finally on it. We are going to make this video right now and really give you guys a bit more perspective on how to assemble the Vulp. Because honestly, it's very difficult, and I understand that. It is a $60 Balisong, so it's obviously not going to be the highest quality construction, but there are some tricks and tips that you could absolutely use in terms of making it a much easier time to assemble this thing. So I want to go through that today, and I want to show you guys like what's going on there and how you can get better at assembling your Vulp, and also how you can get better at assembling aluminum channel Balisongs in general. Now, a few things that I wanted to address. First of all, the Vulp has a bit of an issue in terms of when you drop it, the screws loosen and it gets tapped relatively quickly. However, this is kind of intentional, but I've kind of learned from my mistake there. You see, the Vulp was made and shipped without any Loctite in the pivots. And this is very intentional because I wanted people to be able to apply their own Loctite or go with Teflon tape or whatever they wanted afterwards. Now I'm realizing that actually that was probably a bad idea, because the thing is, if you have a Balisong with no Loctite, any drop is immediately going to give it tap. And the reason for that is the vibration of the pivots is going to be affected pretty easily by any amount of, hitting on the ground. Like, it vibrates the entire structure of the knife a lot, which means that the screw is going to back out almost immediately in that circumstance. So that's something to be aware of, is that there is literally no Loctite on the Balisong, so that's why it's developing tap the first time you drop it. It's supposed to be Loctited by the end user. However, I have a feeling in future batches we're going to look into finding a better way to Loctite it so that it keeps the factory tune for longer, because I've found that the factory tune on this thing is actually pretty good, but yeah, that's just something to note. One other thing to note before we get started here is that tap is not actually that bad of a thing, and I plan on making a full video about this, but tap is a thing that was created as a metric for how well tuned a knife is. But the truth is that the difference between a tapping and non-tapping knife is an incredibly small amount. It's like less than 1/1000th of an inch in terms of your tolerances, especially with bushings. And so finding a way to tune a Balisong to have literally no tap is very, very difficult. And for a Balisong that is only $60, the truth is you can only expect so much. However, I do intend to teach you how you can get around having tap and learning to tune that out in this video. So let's get started with a few things that you will need or want. So first up is going to be a good quality Torx driver. Now, inside the box is not a good quality Torx driver. There is a Torx driver, and it is better than nothing, but it is not good quality, in my opinion. It's what you get for free with a $60 Balisong. So this is what's included inside the box. We have replacement hardware for pretty much everything on the Balisong, which is very nice. We have this horrible little piece of trash. Never use this. Actually, this will become useful in a minute, but don't use it for its intended purpose. That's all I'm saying. Then we have this bushings right here, and then we have the barrels right there, the screws that are extra, and then this guy. This is your Torx driver. Now, the difference here is that this is a Weehaw T8. And this is a no-name T8, okay? This is made out of tool steel. It's not extremely hard. It, I'm certain, is slightly hardened, but it's really not that great of quality. And because it's from a no-name brand manufacturer, it's not terrible quality, but it is nothing compared to like a Weehaw bit or anything like that. So if you can use this, but whatever you do, do not crank down super hard with this. And actually, in general, with a bushing-based system, you aren't supposed to crank down super hard. I know that that's what most people do when they have a bushing Balisong system, is they like take it and then they tighten it as much as they can, and that's how you get all the tap out. That is actually a bad practice. You're not supposed to do that. All that does is it takes your washers and it takes the bushings and it crams the bushing really hard into the washer, and then it creates a groove inside of the washer. And then the next time you take apart the knife and then put it back together, that washer with the groove in it isn't going to work as well as an original washer that was nice and flat. And so what you're left with is a knife that has really bad tap issues or stuff like that. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You need a Torx bit of some kind if you can. The one in the box will work okay, especially for what we're going to do in this video, but a better quality one is always suggested. Or, even better than that, it would be something like this. This is what I'm going to be using for the video. This is a full-size Torx T8 driver, okay? This is a full-size driver. This is a full-size Torx T10. These are the best thing in the world. The stubby screwdriver is very good and allows you to get a lot of torque on there, but these do a much better job of giving you fine motor control over the amount of torque that you're putting on the screw, and they are the highest quality ends. Even the Weehaw bits don't compare to the actual ends of these screwdrivers, so I could not suggest getting yourself a full-size screwdriver more. The other thing you will need is some kind of lube. I prefer Super Lube. It's my favorite type of lube, and we're actually going to be selling Super Lube in these bottles soon enough on willhirsch.gay, so you could buy your own bottle there. It's not available right now, but it might be available when you watch this video if you're watching it a few weeks later, so I don't know, check it out. Either way, what I'm getting at is you need lube. You need a good driver, and then we can use this tool, and I'm actually probably going to use this tool to demonstrate this in the video, but this is something called a pivot needle, and this is a very, very cool piece of technology that was created by Indiana John. This is one that he actually made, and this is something that you can use to align your pivots very, very easily and very, very quickly. So this is a super cool piece of technology, and something to note is it's created in a way where you can actually take the pivot. You'll notice that this little spot fits right into my pivot there. I can literally shove this entire thing through the pivot and align everything very easily, and then it just comes out the other side, and voila, there you go, you're done. But you could do a very similar thing with this little tool that they include. Even though it's not actually for taking apart the knife, you can use it and kind of shimmy its way in there and then stick it through and use it to align everything. So we'll do that in a minute, but right now we're going to take apart this Balisong. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put away these bushings. Okay, the bushings that are included inside of the Vulp packaging are not for use with the Vulp until you have tuned them, okay? And tuning bushings is a very complicated process that requires a lot of very fine adjustments and some special tools, and the only reason that the bushings are included with the Vulp is so that you could potentially learn how to do that and use them, okay? They are not tuned to your specific Vulp. You would need to learn to do that yourself, so that's the first thing to point out there. Also, when you're taking apart your Vulp, if you do want to try tuning your own bushings, make sure that you take the bushings that are currently in your Vulp, especially if they're already good enough, take them and save them and make sure that you keep track which handle was which. So you need to keep the safe handle bushing in the safe handle and the bite handle bushing in the bite handle. Okay, it's very important because there's a slight variance of thickness across the length of the blade. Obviously there shouldn't be any variance, but if there is, even if it's a, less than 1/1000th of an inch, that will be a problem for later. Okay, so let's go ahead and take this guy apart and get to this. So I'm going to use my full-size T8 here, but you could use your little T8, and you'll actually notice that these screws are already pretty chewed up. And that is because the original screws that came with the Vulp apparently were not hardened. And I wasn't aware of this until very recently. And I never had a problem with them stripping, but you can definitely see that they, even with a slight amount of use, they get kind of chewed up. So it will start coming with hardened screws very soon. So we're fixing that issue. I wasn't totally aware of that. Now, the other thing to note is that this is going to be, the barrel is going to be in there pretty tightly. What I do is I take my full-sized driver here, and I just pop like that. Pop it right through, straight through, just like that. Something else you can do is you can do the same thing with this guy. So if we put this back in there in one go, take this, right, put it in there, boop, same thing, pops right out. And that is the one good use of the little L tool. So, okay, now what we can do is slide off the handle. Now you'll notice this is very tight. The squeeze from the sides of this guy are super tight. Oh, other things you'll need, by the way, is a nice surface to work on that you're okay with getting dirty. That's why I have these paper towels here. And also, I could not suggest more just having a microfiber cloth. This is going to allow you, I'm going to take our good washers and set them to the side so I don't accidentally mess with those. And then I'm going to clean our old washers, but we're probably not going to use these old washers. We're going to use new ones. So yeah, we're just going to clean those guys off. And you can see these guys have been chewed to all hell. So that is very interesting to look at. Whoever assembled this knife must have had a bad time. All right, so go ahead and wipe off the pivot there with my microfiber cloth, and I'm going to kind of wipe around the other pivot as well. Just really want to get it as clean as possible. And then same thing with the barrel. I just want to make sure the barrel is nice and clean and really, really give that a bit of a shine. And that's looking pretty good, so that's not too bad. What I will do is I will take the extra screws out of here because we're going to replace the screws entirely, but we're not going to replace the bushings. Okay, now you want to do this one handle at a time as well. And the reason to do it one handle at a time is you really do not want to lose track of what side your bushings are on. It is extremely important that you maintain the same side, you know, from thing to thing of the bushing. So what we're going to do now is take our guy and we're going to try to push the bushing out and we're going to try to leave it in the same orientation, okay? So I want to leave it facing up. This isn't completely important, but with that side up, I know that that's how the bushing came, okay, and I'm going to try to maintain that same orientation. It's not completely necessary, but it can be helpful to making sure that your knife goes back together and has the minimal amount of play possible. So bushings need to stay both in the correct side of the handle, and they also need to hopefully stay facing the same way. It's not like 100% necessary, but it's still good practice. Okay, now what we're going to do is clean out the inside of this handle. So I'm going to go ahead and fold my microfiber cloth in half, and we're just going to shove it into the handle like this and drag it through. You can see that got out a lot of gunk. I'm going to do that again, and that'll make us nice and clean. Okay, very beautiful. Last thing I'm going to do is take the microfiber cloth and turn it inside of the handle like this and just get as much gunk out of there as possible. All right, and this is going to produce a very, very nice feeling balisong by the end of this, is the idea. Okay, so now we've disassembled it. Now we need to assemble it. Okay, so we've cleaned all of our parts and we need to put it back together. So there's a few things that we need here. We need fresh washers. Okay, you don't want to use washers that have already been used. As I said, they get destroyed inside of the knife. They get crushed because you tighten them down against a very hard bushing, and so it's very important to keep that as good as possible. The other thing we're going to use brand new screws. I'm hoping that when we upgrade the hardware to better hardened screws and potentially even T10 screws in the future. I don't know how long it'll be until we can make that happen, but if we can, that'd be awesome. And so right now we're working on upgrading the hardware, and hopefully we'll be able to sell hardware upgrade kits so that people that bought the original Vulp can easily transition over to better hardware, or they can just purchase hardware from USA Knife Maker, because the barrel is honestly perfectly fine. It's mostly just the screw that needs to be replaced. So I don't remember exactly what the measurement is of the screw, but I believe NRB figured out what the measurement is. So if I found that, you can probably find it in the comments down below, and you could buy, you know, new screws for it potentially. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's put it together. So the first thing you'll want is you'll want your bottle of lube handy, and you want something with a needle tip because that's going to allow you to apply it very precisely, okay? Then you need your pivot, one screw, and two washers, and then your bushing, okay? And we're going to put this all together in one go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my lube, and I'm going to apply just the tiniest fraction of a drop to the inside of the bushing area, okay? This is not a full drop. This is just a tiny fraction of a drop, and then I'm going to swish it around using the end of the needle, okay? So it just coats the entire area. Then we're going to take our nice and clean bushing, and keeping the same orientation that it was when it was first in there, we're going to put it in like that, okay? Now we're going to go to the bottom of it, and we're going to add another very small drop of lube. Once again, you're not probably doing a full drop of lube. You just want it to be enough to kind of coat the area. And then when you take the washer, you want to make sure to apply it with the flat side. You'll notice there's a kind of rounded side and then there's a flat side. You want the flat side to be towards the bushing, okay? So So we're going to apply that like that. Then what I'm going to do is kind of pinch it and go to the other side, okay? Once again, apply a very small drop of lube here. And then put this on top. Now, this is where we're going to put the handle on. However, something I'm going to tell you right now is we might need to do a special step to make sure that this handle slides on easily. But we'll find out if we need to do that in a moment. For now, what I'm going to do is pinch both of the washers at the same time, and I'm going to slide them a little bit towards the edge of the handle. So I'm not actually lining them up perfectly. We'll do that in a moment. I'm just pinching them and sliding them towards the edge of the blade, and then I'm going to try to put them between this guy and then slide the whole assembly together. Okay, so that's looking like that's extremely tight. So we're going to do the little trick I was talking about. Now, this can be done with a number of instruments, but what I highly suggest is using a screwdriver and your microfiber cloth, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to slightly flex this spot where the metal has been pinched in. You see, what happens is they mill this area to be very precise, but the problem is that there's only so much preciseness you can do. And what actually happens is after the fact, you see this pin that's in there? They have to install that pin inside of the handle. And so what happens is they use a little plate that they stick inside of here, and then they install the pin. And what's supposed to happen is that plate is supposed to keep the metal from deforming and keeping it from getting smaller. But what actually happens is even with that plate in there, it still will deform slightly, and you will have this area become smaller than it should be. And so all we're going to do is use the screwdriver to open that area up just slightly. It's the slightest amount. You really don't need much. And by doing that, it'll allow us to slide the assembly back together. And then when we tighten it with a screw, it'll pull both of the sides back together, and you should have a pretty good system going on. So I'm going to take my microfiber cloth, and we're going to use this to keep from scratching the handle, okay? What we're going to do is put it around the screwdriver, then slide that into the handle. Oh, this actually might be too thick. No, that fits. Okay. It might be too thick, including the microfiber cloth. But that's a good sign, because that means it fits really well. Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we've slid that in there, and then we're just going to give it a bit of a torque, okay? So I'm just going to kind of twist against it, like that, okay? And that is going to open up that hole just slightly. Okay, and you can see I'm kind of giving it the gas, but I'm not doing a ton here, okay? It's not like a massive amount is necessary, but you might need to do that a couple times, but that is the goal here. Now, once again, we want to make sure that there's no like hairs or anything in here, so always, before you start assembly, make sure everything's nice and clean. And pinch together your stuff again. Let's see if we can get this to go. Oh yeah, see how much easier that is that time? Look, it went right in, and I barely did anything. Okay, look at that. All right, so we're already doing pretty well. I'm just kind of pinching these guys together and kind of forcing it to go in the right direction. Now you can see a hole all the way through there, okay? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take our little tool that I hate, and I'm gonna push it through there. And look at this. You wanna be careful not to like scratch anything on the inside, but as long as you kind of push it through, look at that. Oh my goodness. We found home. Now I can use my hands to kind of push it back into the position that's correct. And then I can use this and a combination of just like pressing in different ways to get the entire assembly back into a much better scenario than it was when we started, okay? Now, installing this part is going to be a bit of a challenge, but it's worth figuring out. So what we need to do is start back here. Okay, we're gonna start at the back and we're gonna work our way to the front. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use our little tool to kind of push everything into place, okay? And you want to use the sides of the tool and not the tip of the tool as much as possible, because what you want to avoid is destroying the washers. Okay, so what you're trying to do here is kind of get everything to get hunky-dory and be all kind of in the same orientation and like put in there properly. Okay, this is also the area where a pivot needle would be incredibly helpful. So this is the kind of thing where if you had a pivot needle, you could take it and put it in like that and literally just push it through. And like that's the easiest crap in the world. But if you don't have a pivot needle, doing it with this, or even better, do you want to see the best version of that without a pivot needle? Guess what? The T10 is almost the exact size you need. And then you can just kind of mix it around like this. So once you've gotten this guy through there and you kind of get everything lined up, if you take the T10 and you put that in there, okay, you can also use it kind of like a pivot needle. And then you just take the pivot from the back and you put it in, okay? And if it sticks, all you want to do is kind of move the handle around and push until it pops in like that, okay? And that's how we've done that. And that was using the pivot needle. That'll make your life so much easier. Go buy one of these from Indiana John, or use this guy or this tool. Okay, so now that's pretty good. Now all we need to do is install our screw onto that handle, and then we'll move on to the next handle. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take this, install my screw, and now this is where it gets tricky, okay? I'm not going to tighten this screw very much. This is something that I know is kind of weird to most people in the balisong hobby, because people are used to tightening the crap out of their screws on their balisongs that have bushings, but you're not actually supposed to do that. Especially when you have brand new fresh washers. Why would you waste them by mushrooming them as soon as you get them? So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to take a nice drop of lube and add it to either side, okay? And this is extremely important because lube also helps to fix tap. It fills in the microscopic spaces and keeps your knife feeling a lot better. And then what we're going to do is I'm going to take my driver, I'm going to take the cheap one that comes with it, just to prove that you can do this with the cheap one, okay? We're going to tighten, and then we're going to stop. And we're only going to go a little finger tight, right? You can see, I'm not cranking down very hard. I'm going to like here, okay? That's not a big crank down, but it gives it a pretty good no tap tune, okay? The other thing to note is that there's a little bit of catching. I feel it kind of catching right around here. Something you can do to fix that is to grab the entire blade, take this one, and what I'm doing is I'm bending it, or I'm forcing it that way and then that way, okay? I'm kind of going forward and then backward. What I'm doing is I'm working out that pivot because we just installed it, so all the different pieces inside of it aren't exactly aligned with one another, okay? So what I'm doing by applying force and then moving the knife back and forth is I'm helping to align all of those pieces inside of there so that now it swings almost perfectly. So see how it was catching and now it's almost perfect? That's just because of what I just did. And then I can tighten it a little bit more. And we're still swinging pretty much perfectly, and we have very close to perfect tolerances. Obviously, to get it literally perfect, you would have to take out the bushing, and then I would honestly not tune this bushing. I would tune one of the bushings that it came with, because this is close enough that I would keep this bushing because it's good enough. And then I would mess with one of these bushings that I don't have to worry about ruining because I at least have one bushing that's good enough, right? So now let's do the other side and do this. I'll do this one more quickly. So same concept, take the screw. I'm getting rid of it, as I said. It's an older screw, doesn't matter as much. Same thing, we're going to pop out. We're going to use our little tool to, come on, buddy. This one's a little tight in there. Oh, did I bop the camera? Sorry, camera. Oh man, this one's real tight in there. I might need to use my full-size driver for this. And this is, as I said, this is where having a full-size T8 driver really comes in handy. There we go. Good Lord. Yeah, you can see how hard that was for me to pop that out. So sometimes the fit between the driver, this guy and the bushing in there is very tight. And in that case, that means that you're going to have to apply a fair bit of force. The other thing to know, though, is that you want to be very careful that you're not applying an upward pressure on both the handle and the blade. Because what that does is it takes these two things that are like stacked on top of each other and it canters them against one another. Okay, it does this. Okay? And by doing that, if you're applying pressure to both, you only want to apply pressure to the handle. You want to be holding the handle and then sticking something through it. You don't want to be holding both and then sticking something through it. It would be even better. I actually created a system for this where I have a piece of wood that I drilled out a hole in that is about the size of one of these, and then I just set the whole thing on top of it and I bang out the pivot. But if you can, definitely only be holding one handle, and then what you're doing is you're trying to keep it from cantilevering, because what's happening is when the two pieces of metal are like moved at odds with one another, even on a microscopic scale, what's happening is the side of the bushing is pressing into the side of the pivot and making it way harder to get out. So you need to be careful of that, okay? All right, so now take this guy apart, just like that. Same situation, you've got a bit of a rough spot looking on these previous washers. Does not surprise me, that is something else. So we're going to put those guys to the side and we're going to use the washers it came with. Same thing, I got my microfiber cloth. Looks like the bushing is already kind of falling out, so I'm just going to let that fall out, and I'm going to turn it over so that it matches the way I'm about to assemble it. So once again, trying to keep that in the same orientation, just paying attention to that. Give this guy a quick wash. Once again, microfiber cloths are the best stuff for this, like a nice big one like this that you would use to wash your car. You can get these off of Amazon, link in the description, or you can get these guys from any auto detail shop or whatever. Then once again, folding my cloth in half to get in between here. Okay, make sure that's nice and clean. Same thing with the bushing. Once again, still paying attention to the direction that I had the bushing. Making sure that I try not to flip that over. And then, because I had to bang so hard, there is a chance that this impacted the inside of the actual pivot. So I just want to make sure that this guy still screws in there just fine, and it does. So that's something to notice, that if you do have to bang a pivot pretty hard, just make sure the screw still works perfectly, and if it doesn't, use one of your other pivots. That's why you have them. Okay. Also, you'll notice the bushing fits pretty tightly around this pivot. Like, this is a very, very snug fit. And that might actually be a reason to not use this pivot. So let me see if one of the other pivots is cut better. Because it could be the outer diameter. If I had to guess, it's probably not the inner diameter of this bushing. It's probably the outer diameter of the pivot not being quite right. Oh, maybe it is the bushing. Interesting. Still trying to kind of keep track of what's what here. It could also be that there's a microscopic piece of metal inside of the bushing, which I'm going to use this guy to kind of scrape out. So let's try that. I do feel it kind of catching at a certain point, so hopefully this can remove that if that is the case. Ooh. Yeah, that's real tight. You can see what I'm doing is I'm kind of working it together. Oh gosh, I'm dropping everything. I'm taking the bushing and I'm turning it around inside of the barrel to try to find out what's catching here and see if I can make that work better. It appears to be the middle top of the bushing that is being the problem here, and I can't exactly see why. Interesting. All right, we'll play with that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, because getting it through there is going to be difficult, but honestly, it's better that I struggle so that you guys can watch me struggle. Also, something that I wanted to note is if the press fit Zen pins fall out, absolutely use Loctite to put them back in. If you can get Loctite Red, use Loctite Red. It will keep them in pretty well. Or you can use super glue. But honestly, Loctite Red will be the best solution there because it's made to hold it through vibrations, whereas super glue becomes brittle and it could crack. So that's just something to know. Okay, once again, we're going to keep going. So for the assembly process, as I said, we're going to take a tiny bit of oil and rub it around on the inside of this little guy there. And then we're going to put our bushing into the hole. And then before we move on to the washer part, I'm going to do the stretching thing because I have a feeling this one is also going to be exceptionally tight. So just take our guy and get it in there. And then once again, just turn. So you just kind of grab the handle and turn it a bit. You're really wanting to just kind of stretch that hole just a little bit. As I said, it's not a ton, but you do need to apply a fair bit of force because remember, you're working with metal here. So there we go. That should most likely be good. And you want to use something as an intermediary like a microfiber cloth or a paper towel or whatever, just to make sure you don't absolutely scratch up the handle to all hell with your screwdriver. You could also use a strong piece of plastic for that part. It's really up to you. Okay, so now you can see we're now pivot side up, so I need to make sure that I'm adjusting when we actually assemble. So go ahead and put another droplet there, and then take a washer, drop it on top, another washer on the bottom. Okay, put that together, give that a pinch, and as you can see, once again, I'm not doing it with them perfectly lined up over the hole. I'm actually pushing them towards the edge of the knife. This allows them to kind of pinch together and make it easier for me to slide the handles on top, and then you can align it later. Okay, there's no need to perfectly align it in this first part of the process. You can see just like that, get that on there. We can kind of slide it together and make this part happen. You get a little bit of a better angle on this. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's what we like to see. Beautiful stuff. All right, so got that pretty well aligned. Take my little guy here, get it lined up a little bit better. Okay, so you can see this top washer is a little bit cantered to the side, and then this bottom washer is cantered from the bottom. So we can try to fix that a little bit by using the side of this thing, but truthfully, as I said, using a Torx T10 driver is going to be one of your better ways of doing this, all right? It's almost the same size as the pivot, and so it'll do a really great job. And honestly, I think that's just another reason that I think it'd be great for us to actually be able to have this device on T10 in the first place, because as you can see, T10 is going to do a much better job here. Okay, so we've got just a little bit left of that washer, I can see. So I'm going to use the side of my T10 driver to literally just kind of push it into place. And you want to be careful not to shred it, so make sure you're not applying a ton of pressure here. It should just be just enough pressure to kind of slide the washer into place and make sure that it's not sticking out in any one specific direction. Okay. We're pretty dang close there, so let's go ahead and try putting in our pivot. Okay, now we're only going to be able to do this one washer. As you can see, the front washer is still a little bit off, so we're only going to be able to do this first one, but I want to do it a bit at a time to show you how I do this. Okay, I'm going to get this in there. We're going to watch from the bottom, and what I'm doing is I'm pushing it forward and I'm wiggling with my thumb to kind of get it aligned. Okay, I'm going to wiggle around the bushing to really help get that alignment, or not the bushing, but the pivot, to help get it into the hole. And there we go. Now we've got it in the hole through the other bushing, and now we're close. We hit the washer that is now blocking it on this side. So now I'm going to take my T10 again and get it in there to kind of help push the washer out of the way. And now our bushing is, or not the bushing, now the barrel is almost ready to come right out of there. So once again, we're going to take the barrel and just force it through with our thumb, okay? And now that guy is nice and in there. And just kind of close this up. Once again, take our brand new fresh screw, nice and pretty. And as I said, do not screw it in and then just crank the living shit out of it. Barely turn it. Don't do it a lot. Okay, you can see the knife has locked up. So before you panic, do the thing that I showed you before. Give it a little bit of a force and move it back and forth. Okay, we really need to align the parts of this pivot right now because they are going to be all kinds of jumbled up because we only just put that together. I'm going to loosen it a bit so make sure that they can like move around and then continue this process. So doing some movement, really adding some force inside of there, hopefully helping to align all of those pieces. Okay, feeling slightly better. Feeling better. Okay, cool. Now let's add some lube Make sure you get a good drop of lube in there because it's pretty dry on the inside. We intentionally didn't use a lot of lube while we were assembling because if you use a ton of lube while you're assembling, you're much more likely to get it inside of the pivot, and you want to avoid that because if there's lube inside the pivot, it's going to make your screws come loose way easier, obviously. So, once again, give that a bit of a tighten. See how that goes? It's kind of catching right here. So we're going to do the same thing. So it's always a process, okay? And adding that lube is going to help with this part of the process because it means that all the little pieces that need to slide against one another to align properly to make this actually work, they can slide better. And look at that. After that bit of work, it's already doing much better. So see if I tighten it all the way. Oh yeah, we're much closer now. Still a little bit slow, but we are very, very close in terms of our tuning here. Very exciting. So really giving that the gas, making sure. So I'm just pushing that way and then that way, and I'm doing one pass that way, open and close, and then the other way, open and close. I'm just pushing in different directions on the pivots, really just helping to kind of take everything and slide it the slightest bit into place that it needs to be. And that's feeling pretty good. Oh yeah. Okay. So now we can tighten it a little bit. As I said, not a lot. We're avoiding tightening it a lot. You really, really, really don't want to crank down on these. That is not the point of bushings. The whole point of bushings is that you can actually not crank down much and still get a very good tune. I know that honestly, I am guilty of this. I used to think that it was the other way around, but it's not. It's not that you can crank down entirely on bushings, and that's all that tuning them is. The point of bushings is that you barely have to crank down at all, and it has a good tune. All right, so by cranking down super hard on the bushings, you're actually ruining your balisong more than you are helping it. So once again, just tighten it as much as you need to and no more than that. Because the longer you can keep the bushings going, the better. So let's get this guy all into shape here. Yeah, that's feeling pretty good. All right, so this is going to take a little bit of breaking in. The handles are a little bit slow right now, but that's just because it's just finished tuning and it's on brand new washers. But playing with it a bit is going to help quite a bit into getting it into a good state. Also, do you hear this? That is a very slight amount of tap. I know for some people that might be like an immediate red flag in terms of the amount of tap. That is nothing. Listen to this. Well, now it's not doing it. There we go. See that little bit of tap? Okay, it's kind of a ringy, dingy sort of tap. If I completely loosen this, listen to this. That is what really bad tap sounds like. Okay? You hear how the entire blade is slapping against the inside of the handles? That is what actual tap is. That is when tap is relatively bad. But even then, tap isn't actually a bad thing. It just means that the knife is kind of loose. Tap is not blade rub. You can check whether or not you have blade rub by pushing down on the blade, pulling up on the handle, and then sliding them together and feeling if they catch. This has blade rub now that I've done that, and so they catch there, okay? Same thing on this side. You can hear the rubbing. Blade rub is what's actually bad in a balisong, not tap. However, blade rub also isn't that bad as long as the balisong is loose, because then the blade isn't catching on the inside, okay? It can rub against it, but the difference between rubbing and it actually catching and stopping your trick mid-flow is what actually makes it a bad issue. So anyways, let's get back into actually tuning this guy up properly. That's great. It's that bite handle one that's giving me a little bit of trouble. It's not wanting to quite cooperate here, so play with it a bit until we find out what it actually wants from us. Come on, baby, play nice. Ooh. Try not to drop it on my keyboard here. There we go. Cool. So anyways, that is a quick tip on how to tune your Vulp. This was not a quick video, but it was a quick tip. And yeah, as you can see, it still has a little bit of tap, and I'm sure I could remove that by tightening the living crap out of these screws, but there's no reason to do that because, as I said, that amount of tap is really nothing. Like, it's really minor. I promise you. I know that everybody has told you that tap is the worst thing in the world. I promise you it is not. Especially on a $60 Balisong. Like, yeah, I can understand if you spent $200 or so on your Balisong and you're upset that it taps, but tap is not actually a thing that makes flipping bad. As a matter of fact, some of the best flippers in the entire hobby flip their Balisongs without pivot screws in there. And they tap so bad. Assassin Flown, who's like literally one of the best flippers in the hobby, flips his Benchmade 47 without pivot screws. It's a completely different thing. So yeah, it's just, tap can be bad, but tap is not the moniker of a bad Balisong. Believe me, I know. I'm going to make an entire video about tap. We'll talk about it. We'll get more in depth as to, you know, what it is and why it matters and why it doesn't. But it's not the end all be all, okay? If you have a little bit of tap, that's okay. And if you don't, that's also okay. Also, as I said, once again, this is kind of tight. Now you can see it's more loose, okay? I was having trouble with that one, but I worked it in by doing this part, and then the other part of working it in is literally just flipping it. And if it's really tight, then just flip it like this, okay? Just like that, over and over again, and then do it the other way. Okay, and you're just forcing it to become looser and to work its way in, and then you'll have a much better product by the end of it. So yeah, there you go. That is a perfectly tuned Vulp. Very, very happy about that. As I said, if you can, get yourself a pivot needle. This shit is the best. Indiana John on Instagram. Really, really great stuff. If you don't have a pivot needle, this will get you at least a beginner's part of the way there, and then you can kind of pry things together. This will help you even more, though. A nice full-size T10. You can stick that right through there. You know, once you kind of get this one in there and it gets aligned enough, this will get you the rest of the way there. You can also use your T8, you know, as an intermediary, so you can start really thin with this one with its T6 and like push that through and then push your T8 through and then push the T10 through if you're really having trouble, and just move your way up until you get the full-size thing. But believe me, that's the way to do it. Take the T10, get it through there, and then just use the end of the T10 to kind of push the washer into place, and then slowly push this bitch right through there. Makes things nice and simple, and you got it. You got a perfectly tuned Vulp. So yes, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. There was a lot of work to create this. I understand it's not a perfect product. It was never intended to be. It was just intended to be a good product for $60. But we are listening to your feedback. We are working on it. We're working on the hardware, making it better quality. I'm really not happy with the quality of the hardware. You can see how chewed up these are, even from a minimal amount of use. So replacing these is going to be paramount in our process in making this thing. But, you know, we're working on it. Swear we are. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope this helped. I know that this is a very necessary video. And one thing that I should have said near the beginning, but this is something I'm going to say now, is don't disassemble your Vulp unless you have to. If you have to disassemble it, then yeah, disassemble it. But if it comes good out of the box, there's no reason to take it apart unless you're specifically wanting to learn. And if you're wanting to learn, that's awesome. Take it apart for that reason. That is a good enough reason for me. But if you don't feel the need to learn and you just want to have your Vulp and use it, don't take it apart out of the box. If it works, just clean it. Use a toothbrush. You know, if you're having a problem, I love these little headphone tools. This is a great little way you can just kind of brush stuff out of the pivots. So if there's gunk in the pivots, you can brush it out. You don't need to take it apart to make it perfect, and that's all that is. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching, and yeah, peace.